So you want to know, should I be buying a home right now? Well, on this month's segment of Keeping Current Matters, I'm going to bring to you what the top experts and economists are predicting is going to happen in the housing market. So in that way, you can take logical information to such an emotional decision and that of question, which is right now the right time to buy a home, and should I? So stick around and I'll cover what's happening in the economic slowdown, home prices, and answer that exact question of should I be buying a home. Thanks for sticking around. Let's cover that important question through what we can control, which is the information we share to you and your response to what's best in your decision making on should you be buying a home. Now, we know the great benefits to what long-term investment in real estate has provided for so many people, as well as relief over the last couple years for those who did have something called home ownership. I'm Justin Martin, bringing you this month's National Housing Market Update. So let's dive right into 3 key areas that are going to impact the answer to that question, which really is the economic slowdown, when we look at what's happening with rates and overall inventory and how that indicates what will most likely happen with home prices. So as we look at the economic slowdown and a survey or response to many people that are in the current markets of leadership, you can see that 3/4 of global CEOs say we are in a recession or will be in the next 12 to 18 months. Now, when you look at the impacts of a recession, I'm going to cover how that impacts housing here in a moment. But for most people, the word recession almost equals something very dramatic. Or there's a big group of people who don't quite even understand what does a recession mean. As we look at the slowdown of spending and the impact that that has for businesses, it usually equates to layoffs. So one question to answer is the security of your job. Now, how secure do any of us feel in our job? You have to ask yourself that. You also have to ask that of the people that you work for. How does that look? And if you feel very secure within your ability to earn in the same industry or a similar industry, it is very easy to better understand that you will be able to make it through the earning of income out of a recession, which really leads us into making sure that people better understand this slide right here, is that as we look at how busy we've been over the last couple months and or year or two in real estate throughout history during a recessionary period, interest rates go up at the beginning of the recession, but in order to come out of a recession, interest rates are lowered to stimulate the economy moving forward. Historically, we have seen a repeated uptick in interest rates followed by lower interest rates. So what we want to do is look at this from a rear view perspective, meaning we can see a lot of what's happened since 1970 to better give us an understanding of most likely what's ahead. And what I mean by that is the exact same thing going to happen? Not necessarily, but it's a good indication of better understanding where are we going. So let's dive into, since 1970, when you look at mortgage rates and recessions, you can see that every single recession started out with increased rise in mortgage rates, and then coming out of the recessional period, we saw a decline in those interest rates. So let's dive right into, over the last 6, what really has happened and the duration of the recessionary periods. So as you can see here, going all the way back since 1980, where did our rates creep up to? And then overall, where did they drop back down? And on average, you'll see that in each of these, we experience about a 1.8% decrease coming out of the recessionary period. So back to the question of should I buy? Well, we can predict that most likely when the recessionary period starts to decline, we will see a lowering of the interest rates, which means that the longer you own a home and your ability to afford a loan, you will be able to refinance your way back down, knowing that, like we've always said, interest rates tend to take their elevator on their way up because they're following what needs to be done to slow down an inflationary period. So as we look at every single recession has in common the same understanding of after recessionary period, rates go back down. And so as we look at how will that impact real estate in general, you can see as the Fed increases the rates time and time again right now to tame inflation, you'll remember that for most inflationary or recessionary periods, they were entered into with the stimulation of housing and that of a slowdown in it, but housing usually leads us out of any recessionary period. So what do we mean by housing? Is then an increased demand again in housing. So 1.8% on average is from the peak during the recession to the trough, and in many cases they continue to fall after the fact as it takes some time to turn things around even when the recession is technically over. So nobody has a crystal ball on rates, but the likelihood that over the next 12 months, 18 months, 24 months, we should start to see rates go back down, which then leads us to the question of, well, what do I do when it comes to price? And as you can see here, a recession doesn't equal a housing crisis. As you look at the last 6 recessions, you can see home values continue to appreciate during the recessionary period. Now, what you have to remember about 2008 and the period of what we're going into, 2008 wasn't necessarily a recession caused the same way that we're going through right now. It was a recession created through a mortgage crisis, through bad lending practices, no job, no income. That is not the case at all in this recession. In fact, we saw so much inflation and demand that the taming of that inflation, the goal overall is to slow down spending. By rates going up as much as they have, you're seeing a lot of people or demand pull out, but that's purely due to the emotional fact of what you could afford to what you can't afford now, to then compounded with a lack of education of what to best expect moving forward. Meaning, nobody wants to buy something in 6 to 12 months. It's not of the same or greater value, meaning that it's gone down in value. And that's a serious fear that many people have right now. So to answer that question, should I buy a home? We'll dive into other reasons for why you're purchasing, but the long-term investment followed by what's going to happen in the short term, you can see that the likelihood is that home prices will continue to appreciate, and the being reason is of inventory. So let's dive right into what's the 4 key areas right now that are impacting demand. Because to answer the question of what's happening in inventory, and remember, inventory dictates what usually happens with home prices. 6 months of inventory is a neutral market, a balanced market. And anything below that means that likelihood is home prices will continue to appreciate, go up in value. So as we look at offers received are starting to decline per listing. Offers over asking price are starting to decline the amount of offers over asking. Sales, the amount of transactions occurring, are starting to go down. Remember, that equates to a change or a decrease in spending. And inventory goes up, what you're starting to see is more homes are staying on the market, which is giving buyers more options. So when you ask yourself, should I be buying a home? A better time to buy a home is when there is more available inventory to meet your needs, and that's exactly what's happening right now. As you look at the long-term benefits of owning that home, now we bring up point before this, is that you will be able to refinance and start to lower your payments with a great likelihood in the future. Now, as we start looking at the benefit of those two things, is your loan to value has decreased, and if home values continue to rise, you bought a home at a lower price than what you would have to in the future. And just waiting on the rate would mean that instead of refinancing your rate down and having earned the equity and created a greater difference in your loan to the value of the home, which usually will also help you with that of your rate and the overall affordability of your mortgage. So let's dive into another comment from Mark Fleming, chief economist of First American. He said there's been a pickup in the inventory that we've seen recently, but it's not from a big increase in new listings, but rather a slowdown in the pace of sales. So remember, what he's stating is that it's not that a lot of people are deciding to list their property. We have seen a greater amount of people try to time this market, a little bit out of fear, bring homes to market in a different part of the season, meaning most homes came or inventory rises in February, March, April, May, and then we start to see it slow down July, August, September, October, November from inventory perspectives. That's the opposite right now. We actually didn't have any inventory at the beginning of the year, but that was because the rate at which how fast home sales were taken off the market. So what you're seeing now is just days on market and available listings are lasting longer, which means you need to be strategic when you sell your home. Marketing matters, and don't necessarily take a dramatic change to your price just because it didn't sell overnight. Remember, that's what the market is sharing with you now. More days on market because there's more available listings, and we've seen a decrease in the demand of people entering the housing market, which is exactly what's supposed to happen during a recessionary period. But let's really look at the current months of inventory. You can see January we're at 1.6. We have only increased 1 month of inventory over the last 5 months. And as you can see, from April to May, and most likely May to June, we'll probably be peaking in somewhere around 3 months of inventory, which still leads to a good market for sellers and buyers. Approaching where we get to at 4 months of inventory is still a seller's market. And remember, 6 months of inventory is balanced. Now, it's been a while since we've been there, but it's also the emotional sentiment of what people choose to do. And the longer that people choose to wait, if we do not see anything occur, meaning home values go down, more people will be looking at the answer of, man, I should have bought a home a little while ago versus waiting because of the situation of where they are today. So we'll continue to follow inventory and answer that question, should I buy? Remember, inventory equals more available homes and most likely the rate of appreciation at which homes will continue to appreciate at. As you can see, the new monthly listing counts, when you look at May compared to 2022 to 2021, you're right. We saw more listings in May, whereas normally as you start looking at January, February, and March, that's when more listings come to market. So we start to see this seasonality of this kind of mountain range start to go back down, and that's the peak of what we're looking for right now, is when will we start to see new listing counts decline, which will be a good sign that inventory has peaked, and we can kind of measure most likely where our normalized market now is. As you see, existing home sales, what happened in 2020 and 2021, we saw a lot of spending. So right now, exactly what was needing to happen is happening due to the rise in rates. And the real question for most people is what's going to happen with home values. So as we return to levels closer to 2019, as you can see here from Daniel Hell is sharing, as active inventory continue to grow, rising 21% above 1 year ago. That's important. But in other words, we're starting to add more options, but the market needs even more before home shoppers have a selection that's roughly equivalent to the pre-pandemic housing market. And so as you look at the beginning of the year, was thinking that we were not going to see a rise in inventory. This rise in inventory now is helping availability, like we said, adding more days on market for listings, but we should start to see less competition, fewer bidding wars, and therefore less upwards price pressure. In fact, a simple analysis shows that a 1 month increase in the month's supply results in a 3% decline in annualized house price growth. And our preliminary house price index is already showing moderation in home prices. This is really good because as people are asking, should I buy a home? Or perhaps as you look at this slide here, should I wait to buy a home? This is the big emotional question around what does the rising inventory do to home prices? So remember that nobody wants to buy something that goes down in value. So we have to start looking at the likelihood of, is that going to happen, to answer your question? And most likely, people are reading national and local headlines, which is the unfortunate problem. We can't control what the economy does, but we can control the information we're receiving. So thank you for listening to this month's National Housing Market Update, because things like the cooling housing market enters the great deceleration, home prices decelerate as the housing market downshifts. None of this is telling the accurate story, which when you look at what that is it's right here. Decelerating home prices does not mean depreciating home prices. So as you look at the example we like to use, which is you're going down the highway at 100 miles per hour, you see the police officer's radar ahead of you and you slam on the brakes down to 55, that feels dramatically different from the way things were, and that's really what we're going through right now. So as you look at the home price forecast for 2022, and remember we were saying an additional 1 month of inventory changes that forecast by 3%, as you can see that as the average of all 7 forecasts are still saying 2022, we're going to see about 8.5% appreciation, means that we're still, let's cut that in half down to 4.5% or 5. And you can see some are a little bit more bullish, as we'll dive right into the estimated home price performance. Now, again, this is from the Home Price Expectation Survey, which is the top 100 economists sharing what they believe is going to happen. You can see we're going to enter a more normalized national housing market of 4% appreciation. But remember, the average price across the nation was up to $455,000. Some local markets $600,000-$700,000. So what's 4% of that dollar amount year over year? You could see the difference in waiting 1 year could be that of $20,000 to $30,000 to $40,000. The difference in over several years could be a couple $100,000 of a change in value, which also equals out to, by waiting, a change in your overall equity by paying down a home. So as you look at really that answer of, here we go, over the next 5 years, what is happening, or predictions in home prices, or where they're going to go in appreciation, hopefully will be somewhere in a more balanced market. And over the next 6 to 12 months will be a great time to enter the housing market, most likely sooner than later, so you can take advantage of the rate changes when they occur, but the value of the home being lower today. As you look at what David Ramsey was sharing, and this is a little bit to close out, to provide a little bit more feedback or context to making sure you feel good on how you want to answer, should I buy a home, is the root issue of what drives house prices almost always is supply and demand. Now, interest rates affect that. When interest rates go up, guess what? Fewer buyers. The demand goes down, thus prices are going to have to soften or not as cray-cray as they have been, and that's what we're seeing right now. And so Dave Ramsey is talking about what many of you already know, which is over the last several months and or years, it was almost impossible to buy a home without the support and help of a highly skilled real estate professional. So as you look at why that was, you can see since 2008, we just have been below the 50-year average on what we needed on average annual units or houses being completed, meaning built. And so as we look at why is the supply so low, it's not just based off demand, it's what's been created. And as you look at who is entering their peak home buying years, is the Generation Z and millennials over the next decade. And so those people are entering their prime purchase power and or peak purchase ability, coupled with a market that has low inventory. We will most likely again continue to see home prices rise. This data or this information wasn't readily available 12 years ago. A lot of people did not necessarily know where inventory was, or that I could get access to information like this on a YouTube channel, on Facebook. And unfortunately, many people did not see the indicators leading to the last housing crisis. But none of the indicators are leading towards a housing crisis right now. What they're leading towards is that of a slowdown, which is exactly what many people asked for. But now you have to enter into that of the way the market is today with where rates are. So let's close with experts don't believe the market is in a bubble or a crash is in the cards. Like during the Great Recession, the nation is still suffering from a housing shortage that has reached crisis proportions at a time when many millennials are reaching the age when they start to consider home ownership. That's likely to keep prices high. And so our goal is never to just bring you good news or bad news for views. What it is just to bring you the news. And right now, a lot of people are asking, should I buy a home? And if you're looking at real estate as a long-term investment and or a reason to be closer to family, a better experience for work, or doing the things that you love doing in life, the indicators towards housing being a great way to build wealth and to help you through a recessionary period, then the answer for most people is yes, because waiting looks like the values of homes will only be greater, and that of your ability to earn wealth through buying down equity over the next 18 months to 2 years is also going to slow down, or the rate at which you accumulate that equity and wealth. So from me to you, I hope you're staying safe. I hope your businesses are moving forward. And as always, I look forward to connecting with you and connecting with the top 1% of agents across the nation. And as we look at bringing you this information, I hope you enjoyed what the top experts and economists are sharing what's going to happen. So that way, those headlines don't continue to hurt your ability to control or respond to how you want to move through the next 18 to 24 months. As the economy does slow down, doesn't mean you have to. And from me to you, I look forward to talking to you next month.